This is another webinar from the BOND program, our program to connect the breeding operation. Today is an important day. Today is the World Day for Health and Safety at Work, and we together with Corteva, with IITA, and also with CIMMYT, we organized some webinars early this morning, and for me at least, and we had another session with CIMMYT that would for anyone that would be interested to see that, we will make that available in our platform, either EIB website. You can will find that. And now for this session, we have Paige from Corteva. That later I will ask Paige to introduce herself, and you will also presenting her experience and how Corteva manages the culture of health and safety, and also Alick to present his perspective on IITA. But before that, I would like to put some word, present some words, or give some words on the importance of health and safety. As I said, today is the World Day for Health and Safety at Work. And the theme for this year is to enhance the social dialogue towards a culture of safety and health. I highlighted two key words here. First, dialogue, discussion, and the second is culture. So this is exactly what we are promoting here, really promoting the dialogue to achieve a better or a strong culture of health and safety. Together, or acting together, we can build this positive safety and health culture. This year, we have, together with some operational leaders from breeding organizations, from breeding stations in Africa, we organized 2 workshops. One workshop was in Nigeria and another one was in Uganda. In total, we had, let's say, almost 40 key operational leaders, and we discussed many aspects of components of breeding operation, from technical aspects like seed process, irrigation, plotmanship, but also some management aspects like gender, how to incorporate gender into the breeding operations, centralization of breeding operations, but also one important aspect that we discussed was the health and safety. We identified many aspects, many opportunities, many challenges, many gaps. And one of the things like PPEs or protocols, etc., we discussed many things, and from that, of course, we have many different actions. And one of the component that was discussed is the importance of sharing experience, sharing knowledge. And this is exactly what we are trying to do here. Sharing experience from both or from different centers, from private sector, to promote better culture, or a culture that would help us to create a safer and healthier place for everyone. With that said, I would like to invite Paige for her presentation. I think that you'd prefer to share your screen, Paige.
Yes, please. I appreciate that opportunity.
Thanks for that, Paige. The floor is yours. Please introduce yourself and go ahead.
Right.
So just before, please, anyone, go ahead, put your questions in the chat. Later, after the presentations, we'll have the chance to discuss. But any time, feel free to put the questions you have in the chat.
Absolutely. Gustavo, thank you. And just a process check. You can see my slides all right and hear me well?
Yeah, thanks, Paige. We can see and we can hear you well. Thank you.
Okay. Excellent. Well, thank you, Gustavo. Hello, everyone. My name is Paige Oliver. I am the Global Seeds R&D Operations Lead, and I'll go into just a little bit more detail about myself and just some context there. But a couple of other areas just to highlight, as you saw on the online bio, also leading our global innovation farms for Corteva. And another passion of mine is that I'm also our Indianapolis headquarters leader for our food security network. So definitely some aspects that you'll see kind of throughout this presentation. So just really grateful for the time with you all, and excited to share some of the things that we're doing, but then also hear from you and hear your questions as well. And so one thing, just to set some context, I'll talk just a little bit about Corteva, just a little bit about me, and a lot about safety. And when we think about safety, there's a compliance, there's a standards component to it, and then there's also a culture component, which is really powerful. And when we think about the culture, a lot of times as we consider how we want to move forward, it's not so much, well, as we consider how we want to move forward in a safety culture, it's somewhat of a reflection of where we are today and what we'd like to improve upon. And so as we continue to think about not just who we were, but who we want to be. And that's what we think about within Corteva, is we get to be who we should be, who we think we should be. And I think you should start to reflect on what should, from an agricultural, whether company, industry, what should we be, and what kind of a safety culture should we have. So I think just a little bit for a quick intro into Corteva, if not familiar, really around our purpose, and even backing up just slightly before then. So Corteva has been a company, it'll be 3 years on June 1st. And how we came about was a merger between DuPont, Pioneer, and Dow. And with that merger, out came all of the egg components from those 3 companies, and that became Corteva. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. And that's also why even in our logo, you see those 3 fields coming together, and it really represents the DuPont crop protection, Dow Agrisciences, and Pioneer coming together as Corteva. And with that, our purpose, it sincerely is to enrich the lives of those who produce and those who consume, ensuring progress for generations to come. We are focused on the farmer. And as we look at some of our core values around enriching lives, meaning that we want to enhance lives. So when we think of health, safety, and wellness, and the land, as we think about sustainable practices, that is absolutely critical. We do that by building together. And so it's opportunities like this where we get to discuss, and that's how we feel like we collectively grow. Stand tall, and what that means, how we define that is that we're leaders and we want to act boldly. We don't want to stay in the background and see what others do first and then copy. No, we want to be out in front. We want to partner with others, bring others along with us. So we're out in front together, but that we'll also appropriately challenge if we feel like that is what's needed. In being upstanding, we're always going to do what's right. And so we'll talk about that too as we look at safety culture and how we manage that. We're curious. So especially as researchers, we are constantly innovating at all levels in all ways. And so love that attribute is part of our core value. And then live safely. And we will absolutely get into some more detail regarding our safety culture. As you look at just some of our operational highlights within Corteva, gross sales are, or I guess in here we have it captured as net sales, over 14 billion. We are impacting and located in over 140 countries in over 100 crops. Most of those crops are focused on our crop protection business. We do have very key crops that we have within our seeds that we are extremely proud of. But when you think of the diversity of crops, that number is really driven from our crop protection and our digital business that is incorporated. We do have over 21,000 employees and over 150 R&D sites. And then you'll see a little later too, when I talk about that, that most of those sites are within our seeds platform and our seeds R&D. Got to brag on our R&D team a bit, just extremely proud of this group, and very humbled to be a part of it. Really, as we look at our strategy across seeds R&D, it's we say, you know, think global, act local. And so here, as it's captured, that global strength, local focus. So we do want to leverage all that we can into the various regions, and then build upon those local strengths as well. And so that is something that we strive to do each day. We talked about that Corteva as a independent company. We are the only pure play ag company in the industry. 3 years old from that respect, but from a research perspective, we have over 100 years of experience in breeding. And so really excited to continue to build on that rich heritage and continue to advance in new technologies. So we do feel that, you know, using that breeding leadership is that foundation for our stronger performance with each generation. You're very familiar with the breeding funnel and how we utilize that. We are, like to say, fanatically focused on farmers, and that is something every day when we wake up, we are thinking about how can we bring more value to our farmers, to our large scale farmers, to our small landholder farmers, and all in between. How can we have a positive impact on their operations, on their profitability? And we do like to leverage those global enabling technologies at our local and regional research centers. And you can see some of those listed here. That technology is extremely important. And then constantly looking at those breeding cycles each year to integrate the newest traits into our elite germplasm to, again, bring that value to the farmer. Just very, very briefly, just wanted to share some of my experience so you can see the context to which I'm speaking to this, and why safety is just so important, and why I enjoy talking about it and I'm such an advocate for. So really, before I joined the company, I was actually an intern, and my background is in synthetic organic chemistry. And so the internship that I did was in discovery chemistry, and it was in the lab. And so first day, you know, they have you sit down, and they give you this thick binder. Oh my goodness, it was this massive, it probably weighed a couple of kilos. So it was this large binder that'd sit on your desk, and you'd have to read it all before you could step foot in the lab, because they wanted to make sure that you understood all the safety practices, procedures, and that you could be safe in the lab, and that you could keep your peers and colleagues safe as well. And so I remember the first time reading it, and then I went back for my second internship, and I read that binder, and then I went back for my third internship, and I read that binder, and really got to appreciate just that detail, that need, and that responsibility for safety in the lab. And so then when I came as a full-time employee, you know, already I'm like, oh my goodness, are they going to give me this binder again? And yes, they gave me the binder, and I talked to others and looked through the binder, read through the binder. But then what also happened is they then asked if I would lead the safety program. And so absolutely. So we did safety walkarounds and various different things more from a compliance, but also a safety culture perspective, as we get fresh eyes, as we look at the different labs, and something we now apply out in the field. But what's also interesting around that is not so much that there's the safety binder that just because I read that kept me safe. That's not necessarily true. It's how I applied it. But then also with the safety program, you know, incorporating recognition for those that go above and beyond in safety, or those that are coaching or mentoring others in safety, and having a fun component to that recognition to, I would say, accelerate those really positive and good safety behaviors. And so that's a learning early on in my career, over 21 years ago, that have really been trying to apply each and every time in each and every role I'm in. And so just the quick path is from discovery chemistry, went into formulation science, again, a lab role, then got out of, transitioned out of the lab into a human resources role, all within Corteva, legacy company, and then came back out from the lab and then out of the office into the field. And so leading our field science team in the US, China, and then Singapore at Merger. And then repatriated back to the US almost 2 years ago now as an operations and innovation lead for our global field science team. And then about a year ago, I have the privilege I've always been curious about the seeds side of the business and now working within seeds. We've been partnered with the seeds group many times over the years. And so I'm just thrilled to now be on the seed side of the business. My background is in biology and chemistry prior to getting that advanced degree. So really, really excited to be with this group. And even more exciting is why we're really here today. And so that's because it's our World Day for Safety and Health at Work, and also incorporating wellness into this. I talked a little bit about the safety in the lab and just that environment, and then how you bring that out to the field and the distinct and different needs that you have in that field environment at that research center that may have field and some lab, greenhouse, maybe controlled environments that are distinct, different, and how do you support teams? How do you build those safety programs? So absolutely understand those challenges. And I want to share just a few stories today. One, to just some additional context. So when I started to lead the field science team while in China, at that time, our model was more, our field scientists were partnering with farmers, leasing fields and conducting, and this was in crop protection, and conducting our research on our farmers' fields at leased sites. And we continued to do that, but during my years there, we also added in some research farms, and so have some experience in, really starting from the beginning, leveraging materials that we have within the company, but how do you really establish safety practices and cultures at these research farms in an area where they hadn't had that previously. And so really interesting journey, and we'll try to incorporate some of that into what I share as we go on. I mentioned Corteva, and as when you have a spin and you have a chance to kind of rename, I don't want to say reinvent, the culture is strong, but specifically around naming, words are so important. And so when we think about Corteva, again, wanted to share with you just a little bit about how that name came about, because it's unique, and then how we apply it to today. So Cor means heart, and Teva is an ancient word for nature. And so that's, as Corteva, we're the heart of nature. And so sincerely, as we think about safety is at the heart of Corteva, we really do have a very strong safety culture, and one that we like to focus and promote. And so next, I'd like to share with you somewhat of just the infrastructure of the safety, and then I'll talk more about the culture here in just a minute. But I do want to share just how we have this set up, so you have this awareness. So in this first one, to live safely, it says Corteva brand value. Really, this pillar is, I'd say, about 80% external. It's really when we're focused outside. So the community, focused on the environment, focused on our customers, focused on our consumers. It's more externally focused. That second one, Core for Life, that's more internally focused. I'd say about 80% internal. That's more about our employees, our stakeholders, our contractors, our partners. It's always asking what is core for the protection of life. And as I mentioned before, it includes wellness. So we want people to return home as good or better shape than when they left. And that's physically, that's emotionally, that's mentally. And so we do want to take care of the whole self. Next, as we look at these core areas, and that's our risk methodology. So really, it's more of our relationship to the program. So at the core, it's really, it's people focused and it's active. So when we think in that center area, those could be areas like leadership. So is leadership modeling our safety behaviors and practices, our values? Do we really incorporate that into what we do each day? Our behavior, so we may know what to do, are we doing it? And that's really important. Communication, are we sharing those best practices? Are we sharing what to do? Are we sharing those positives? Are we sharing the near misses? And we'll talk about that. Education, do we know how to be safe? Sometimes that sounds maybe a little silly, but in some cases there's maybe a piece of equipment where we think we know how to use it, or we've always used this piece of equipment in a certain way. There might be a safer way to do that task. And so are we aware of that? Do we know what to do? Are we comfortable intervening if we see someone else that may not be using the most safe behavior? And then engagement. Are people doing this just to kind of check that safety box, or are they really all in from a safety program perspective? And then it also relates to some key areas that impacts us all: environment, equipment, potentially chemical and energy. And then our core 10 life standards. And this really is our imperatives. And it's those standards that protect us from those life-threatening hazards and serious injury. And so as we look at the standards within Corteva, so with our legacy companies that we had over, oh goodness, well over 300 different standards. That's a lot. So as we kind of distill focus, we put them into 10 categories, and now we have probably about 100 standards. Not all apply to every site at all. We have production sites, we have large scale seed production sites, we have chemical manufacturing sites. There's a lot of standards that may not always apply to our research farms and our research centers, but still these 10 categories do. And so we just want to ensure that we have that well detailed out. Okay, bring it back to the field and share an example. And so we talk about this, it is all about partnership. And environmental health and safety group within it's separate from our R&D group, but they are strong partners with us. So we act as one team. And here's a case in point. So last August, we went through a bit of a restructure, not a complete restructure, but one in which we started to grow our centralized sites. So there's some sites that we want to get bigger, and with that, some sites that we needed to get smaller as we're centralizing some of our activities. And so when we were doing that, we'd have sites that in prior had 15, maybe 10 employees, now have 5. And those smaller sites were in the past kind of on their own for all of their safety needs. And so as they were thinking about all the changes that they were going through, one of them that they really raised was environmental health and safety even involved in this discussion? How do we move forward with some of our safety programs and practices? We don't know what to do. This feels heavy. How are we going to be able to keep pace? Great challenge. And so we had engaged environmental health and safety and discussed, and there's 3 areas that we want to work together on, and how to support that change for that team as the site becomes smaller. First was in the field research standards clarity, and I'll go into some more detail. Second is around compliance, and third is around culture. And so first, as you look at that field research standards clarity, here what was happening is that every global research center, you remember I showed it on an earlier slide, we have about 150, almost all of those are seeds research sites. We do have crop protection research sites as well, but the vast majority, over 150 of them, or about 150 of them, are within our seeds R&D. And they were taking each standard, reading each standard, and then trying to discern which part of that standard applied to them. So an example could be, you'd have a standard that's 30 to 40 pages long, but potentially for that R&D site, there's only maybe 3-4 paragraphs that really applied to them. And they would have to, so as you can imagine, if you have about 100 standards, they were reading them all. And that takes a lot of time. And then as they're updated, that just takes a lot of time. And so, and what that was the before, and the current, the after, is these global safety standards that really are targeted for field research environment. So you can still have the corporate standard that we have as Corteva, but then we have icons that help highlight what is appropriate and applicable to that field research environment. And then they can discern, do I have greenhouses? Yes. Okay, let's read this section. Or this site, nope, I don't have any greenhouses. I don't have to read that particular section. I can move on to the part that applies to me. And then we also put that to units that are easily searchable. And then the action is clear, because that's really what you want from a standard, is to be able to interpret it in the same way, and with that consistency. From a compliance, it was from standards are difficult to align, auditing expectations, or interpretation. So you could have, if 3 people read that standard, perhaps you had 3 different opinions on what needed to get done. And so really we wanted to clarify and standardize that. And then also we had recording systems that were difficult to track our near miss learnings. And what we've gone to is this aligned standards that are written from implementation to auditing. So that way it's clear, everybody knows what to do, and that we're all aligned in it. So that has simplified our compliance process. And then also this one is still in the works, I would say. We have not finalized it. We have a number of near miss tracking tools within R&D. And so actually we're in the process of determining which one we want to use for seeds R&D and leverage that. And we can talk more about that if you have an interest. But we're just trying to, from a compliance perspective, keep things more simple, one source of truth, so we don't have multiple versions. Then culture, this really is the most important. So one is, as you can imagine, spending so much time on the compliance pieces, reading the standards, highlighting what you need to do, acting on it, very important. But really, we wanted to move more towards that safety culture where, again, we know how to be safe and we're looking out for each other, and that we're recognizing those good safety behaviors. And so we are moving to and living safely, that we're embracing safety and the environment in all that we do, and are sincere in that. And so that is how I would summarize from a culture perspective. We can make safety very complicated. And honestly, in the past, we have. So as you go through various changes from an organizational perspective, or changes from a site perspective, we kind of go through almost this wave of safety culture where we continually need to refocus on what is most important. And yes, we need to know how to be safe, and we need to have an environment, and that's the culture perspective of being able to ask if we're unsure, if we're not quite certain if this is the right thing to do, or this is the right way to do it, that we have that environment where we can ask. And then also that we're looking out for each other, and we feel comfortable intervening and knowing that the reason why we're asking someone to do it a different way is because we care about them. It's not because we're trying to make sure that, our audit's necessarily perfect. It's that we care about their physical health, or even as people are going through difficult times and situations, that we can walk alongside them and care for their mental health as well. And we also have mental health and emotional health programs and educational pieces to help support and equip our teams. All right, this slide was a little sticky this morning. I think it might be doing the same. I see it spinning, so I'll pause for a minute as it loads. But it's my final slide, and what I'd like to focus on really is what's core for you. So as let's see here, it should load here in a second. If it doesn't, I'll click again. Ask yourself, when it comes to your personal safety and your day-to-day interactions, your exposure to risk in the workplace, what is core for you? Let me see here if I can click. Okay, let's see if we can tell I have something that's a little unstable. It's okay, we can leave it on this slide. But really, the intent here is that everyone needs to understand that Core for Life is about protecting those around you. And as a leader, it's ensuring the safety of your team, your peers, your colleagues, your coworkers. But the other really important aspect of what's Core for Life is also helping every single person to be active partners in our own protection as well. And so, you know, on this day focused on safety, I just leave you with an appreciation for what you're going through, and the complexity that sometimes safety is, but just how of utmost important it is that we are looking out for each other, and that we are, each and every one of us are advocates for the safety of others. So again, thank you for this opportunity. I look forward to answering some questions at the end. And Gustavo, I'll turn it over for you and transition to Alick.
Thanks, Paige. Thanks a lot. Really good to hear and your thoughts or Corteva thoughts on safety, completely aligned with our thoughts too. So I see some questions in the chat, but I think that before we go to the chat to this question, I think that would be good to hear CG perspective, and then we go to the questions that maybe would help to answer that too. Alick, you in the call? Or ready? I see that you are in the call, but are you ready? And I believe that you would prefer to share your screen, Alick. Is that correct?
Hi, Gustavo. Yeah, just a warning, my internet connection is a little bit unstable, but I'll try.
So I can share too, if you prefer.
Share this, but if I just a warning. Yeah, the presentation I sent you actually had some errors in it, so let me just try and share mine first and see.
Yeah, we can see, but not in presentation mode, Alick.
Okay. There, can you? Can you guys see the presentation?
Yeah, we can see your screen. Yeah, go ahead. Introduce yourself, Alick, and the floor is yours. Okay, go ahead. Alick, can you hear us? Alick, we can't hear you. I think that your connection is not good. Alick.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. We can go ahead. We hear an echo, so probably we'll need to mute one of your iPhone or you. I don't know which one.
Yeah, I'm using two devices because the.
Yeah, go ahead. So now we can hear you well. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah, I was saying thanks. Sorry about that. Thanks, Paige, about that presentation. It helps us put things in perspective as an organization that's on the journey to implement, to take safety measures as part of our culture. And I was listening to you talking about some of the things you went through when you started working with these organizations in terms of spending time going through binders. I had a similar experience when I worked with DuPont and Bayer and Agriculture Canada. In most cases, I spent about 2 weeks actually just going through binders and doing training. Like I was not even allowed to touch the company vehicle until I'd finished the defensive driving. And then on top of that, I couldn't even, you are not allowed to use any piece of equipment until you had gone through the training, you have gone through the SOPs and the JSAs. And that's part of my talk today is just to go over job safety analysis and then also unrelated in a way, but it's also related to safety, how to dispose of pesticide in a safe way to ensure that we are not harming the environment. So, yeah, can you see my, this is going to be fine. Okay, there. Can you see the presentation?
Go ahead, Alick. Yeah, we can.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about job safety analysis, in short, JSA. This is essentially a procedure that's been developed to incorporate safety and health practices in an operation when you're carrying out a task. It's a written procedure that's developed to review the work steps that are involved in a task, and then the associated hazards and also the corresponding solutions to minimize or eliminate the hazards. Essentially, you go through 3 steps. You identify the steps that are involved in the task with safe ways to do the job. This is based on the idea that safety, as Paige pointed out, is an integral part of what we do every day. It's not a standalone activity. So, and JSAs usually are suited for jobs that are defined, JSAs are not defined for jobs that are defined too broadly or too narrowly. So you should just have the right kind of information, a hazard, and also how you can overcome it. Okay. So essentially, when you're carrying out a job safety analysis, you go through 4 steps, 3 steps, but I've added the first one there where you actually selecting the job. So you determine which jobs you're going to analyze. Sometimes we are overwhelmed with the number of jobs that we have to look at. So you can prioritize. And then you move to breaking down the jobs into segments to make it easy for you to identify the associated hazards. And then after that, you in step 4, they actually made it the other way around. You identify the potential hazards and then determine the preventative measures that you should be putting in place to minimize the hazards. All this is done to ensure that the employees are working in a safe environment and to minimize the number of injuries, recorded injuries in the workplace. So the first step, like I said, is selecting the job. And ideally, all the jobs should be subject to analysis whenever possible. But in most cases, you're going to find that you have to develop JSAs when you introduce a new piece of equipment. Like in our case, in IITA, we are moving to mechanizing our operations. So it's important that we do develop JSAs for all the new equipment that's coming in. We are working with EIB, bringing in new pieces of equipment. And of course, with that, most of the people that will be operating those pieces of equipment are not familiar with how to run them. So it's important that we have information in place that's going to help them actually operate the equipment in a safe manner. Similarly, when you introduce new raw materials or a new process, or if you move a task, you move it into a new environment, you should develop JSAs. Say if you are working outside and then you move the task inside, maybe the lighting is not as good, so you have to go through the process to ensure that safety is observed. So continuing with selecting the job, how do you prioritize? Like I said, because sometimes you can have so many jobs. How do you pick which jobs you should be focusing on? Usually you can go through the records. I saw a question in the chat there, like whether the CG centers actually keep track of the accidents. And but if you go through the records to the extent that you have the records, you can go through the records and see where have you been having or encountering more accidents, and which hazards have posed more severe accidents, and then where the potential for severe injuries or illnesses. When you establish a new job, people are not familiar with that, so of course you are going through a learning curve, and the chances of people having accidents are high, or when you modify a job. And also infrequently performed jobs, when say, and this is the case where in our industry, there's a lapse. Sometimes we do seeding for 1 year in spring, and then we have to wait again spring the following year. So there is a lapse there. Maybe you need to actually review people adhering to safety measures. So you carry out a JSA. Then the next step after you identify the job is to break down the job into smaller steps so that it's easier for you to associate those with any potential hazards. And then just make sure that you don't generalize, because when you generalize, it's a little bit difficult to associate the tasks to hazards. If to describe the steps in where it's not possible, like you have more than 10 steps, try to maybe chop it up into 2 segments, and for each of those segments have a different JSA. Also make sure that you keep the steps in the correct sequence, because if they're out of sequence, they are likely to introduce hazards that were not there, or you might end up missing some of the hazards associated with the steps. So this just gives the format of the JSA. It's got the 3 columns: the job steps, potential accidents or hazards, and the preventative measures that you have to take. So after you carry out the first step there, like in this case, we're looking at preparing a planter for planting. After you finish the steps, you note them down in the first column. In this, you visually inspect the area before you start planting. You visually inspect the area to look for things like ditches or obstacles that may pose the hazard. If it's off-site, you unload the planter from the and some are going to find that, like in this case, just the task of offloading the piece of equipment will have its own JSA. So you can refer to that JSA to make sure that everything is in order. And then make sure that each step is recorded in sequence, and make notes about what's being done rather than how it's done. Usually start with an action verb just to ensure that you capture the task properly. When you're observing when you're breaking down the job, observe the worker performing the job, and this should be done by somebody with experience, as it's easy for them to actually relate to what's being done by the worker that's being observed. The JSA is trying to uncover individual unsafe acts. Sometimes you might get carried away and focus on maybe correcting what the person is that don't what the person is doing. Don't be judgmental, just observe what they are doing. Start the job and not the individual, and because you're focusing on identifying the hazards and making modifications to eliminate or reduce them. The job should be, when we're observing the job, it should be done under normal circumstances, like where they would have done the circumstances under which they would have performed that job. And after you complete that, make sure that you convene and discuss what has transpired, so that you get ideas from everybody and taking their input in terms of what they saw during the performance of the job. Then the third portion is identifying potential hazards. Identifying the potential hazards. This is based on the job that you've been observing. So based on your knowledge as well and the experience, you list down the things that could go wrong. Like depending on what you saw, what do you think are the potential traps? Where could the worker get hurt? So you note down those things, and then maybe conduct a second observation. Let them go through the process again, but this time now focus on the potential hazards, just identifying what could go wrong. At this point, also make sure that you don't attempt to solve any problems that you are detecting. Just focusing again on just noting what could go wrong. Just to maybe guide you when you are identifying potential hazards, there are some things that you can be looking out for. For instance, you can ask yourself, can any body part get caught or between objects? Do the machines that they are using present any hazards? Or is there any potential for slippage or tripping or falling? Is the worker exposed to extreme heat or cold? So there is at least you can have some guidance so that it's easy for you to look out for those pitfalls. So after you've done the second, you've finished checking for potential hazards, you put those in the second column. So, and each of the hazards that you've identified should correspond actually to the steps, the sequence of events in the job. So in this case, visually inspect an area for to be planted for ditches or other obstacles. The corresponding hazard in this case that they identified was the tractor could draw over when crossing the slopes or the ditches, and the equipment could also get damaged. When you are offloading the planter, again, the tractor could draw over when unloading, and it could end up in a crash hazard. And these, again, are just some of the things that you should look out for, especially when you're dealing with mechanical equipment. So pinch points, rub points like when you're dealing with a PTO, maybe shear points when you're working with a combine, the knives, stored energy when you're dealing with springs or air. So those are things that will guide you in identifying the hazards. And also there are some environmental issues like that you should keep, you should be aware of, like noise, dust. Is the employee getting exposed to more than necessary sunshine? Heat stroke, if like in Ibadan, we work in extreme hot weather. So is there potential for the employee actually to suffer from heat stroke? And also maybe just be aware of the animals in the surrounding. Then after you've done all that, the next step is now to come up with the way of eliminating, or rather mitigating the hazards that you have identified. And this diagram actually shows the ranking in terms of effectiveness from eliminating to using PPE. So PPE will be the least effective in actually controlling a hazard. The best way is actually to completely eliminate the hazard if possible. And then if you can substitute that hazard or use engineering controls, like if you are working with, say, a table saw, if it doesn't have a guard, you can maybe make sure that you have a guard installed there to make sure that the employee doesn't cut their fingers. So finally, after you're done with determining the measures that you should be taking to control the hazard that you've identified, you can put those in the third column. So in this case, regarding the visual inspection of the area, we identified that the tractor could draw over. What can you do to prevent that or to control that? Make sure that you visually inspect the area for obstacles. Also locate a level obstacle-free area to unload the equipment and enter the field at offsite. So the last column there, that's where now you have all the preventative measures that you came up with through the analysis that you carried out. And this should be subject to a discussion with everybody to ensure that you agree and you didn't miss out anything. This is just a sample GS. So just using examples that we went through there with the planter. You have the sequence of basic job steps and then potential hazards and the recommended actions. And then on top there, of course, there is you have people that should be signing off. So there's a bit of accountability that, like in some jurisdictions, I know that management actually is liable should anything happen, and that's why they have to actually sign on to a document like this. So the manager should be aware of this. Like in my case, my director should be aware of the steps, and they should be able to sign off here. And also maybe just keep track of the versions. So like I said, you have to review this every so often. So make sure that you keep track of the versions. And then after that, of course, it's pointless developing these documents if you do not make the employees aware of the best practices to avoid or prevent encountering or getting into a situation where they could hurt themselves. So you can communicate through this, maybe post it on the intranet, but also make sure that you have at least paper copies, hard copies in binders, and they should be accessible to all the employees. The format that I showed there is a side-by-side format. It's usually not very ideal for instructional purposes. So if you're going to use it for training, maybe use a more narrative style communication format to communicate with the employees. And you can use the JSAs to improve or modify your SOPs that are associated with the piece of equipment or activity that you're examining. JSAs, like I said before, when I went through, when I was being initiated, I had to go through, read through the JSAs as part of my training. And this was done under the supervision of my boss or an experienced employee who knows what they were doing with the equipment. And yeah, it should be reviewed by employees or anyone doing the job for the first time in conjunction with the SOPs. Now, I don't know if this is going to work. It won't. Okay. Gustavo, are you able to see the video?
We can see. It's not that fast, but we can see.
Okay. Yeah.
So Alick, just be aware of the time. Okay.
Yeah. So it's just a short clip. It just shows what could go wrong if employees are not following the right steps. Like in this case, maybe this is something that they don't do so often, but it would have helped actually to have the basic steps that they should be following before loading that the sea can onto the ship. So just highlights what could go wrong. So my second part of the presentation is focusing on the disposal of pesticide residue. We all know that cleaning out equipment can be actually take time. It can take time to dispose of chemical residue. And these pesticides can actually accumulate in areas like if we continuously getting rid of them in the same place over and over, they can accumulate and they can be harmful to the environment. So as a way of maybe mitigating this, some scientists like actually in Sweden, they came up with a way of breaking down the pesticides so that the material that gets into the ground is broken down and doesn't have any harm in terms of harming the sensitive ecosystem or leaching into the water table. So essentially, biobed is just it could be, you could describe it as a hole in the ground, or it could be fancy aligned enclosure that contains a mix of organic material. And the organic material will have microbial microbes that can inactivate the herbicide. Originally, when they started this, they used 50% straw for wood chips and 25% topsoil and compost. The idea is that the pesticide will absorb to the mix, and the microbes will break down the pesticide into harmless liquid water, essentially. And the effluent they found that is less than 90% than the original liquid that was poured into the biobed. So, like I said, it originated in Sweden in the about 20 years ago or so. And it's an effective way to minimize environmental contamination from pesticide residue. The biobed also goes by different names in different jurisdictions, like biomass bed in Italy, biofilter in Belgium, and phytobac. I think this was also phytobac was also developed by Bayer. And like I said, basically consists of material that encourages microbial growth that will break down the pesticide when the pesticide is applied in low concentration. So the pesticide is removed by adsorption to the soil, and the biomix, and it's degraded, and then the rinsed solution adheres to the soil particles and the organic matter, organic biomix components. Naturally occurring bacteria and fungi that are introduced through the biomix is what is responsible for breaking down the pesticide. The degradation actually will be optimized if the conditions are moist and warm, usually about 20 to 30 degrees. And the biobed should be located in a well-drained area that's kept warm. And the cool thing is that some of the water that will come out of this is that can actually be used to irrigate grass or shelters, so and they won't actually have any harm to the vegetation. This is just another design of the biobed. We won't get into that. So the biobed can treat a number of herbicides, insects, and fungicides separately or in a mixture. This has been studied by AAFC, and they found that about 90% of the introduced pesticide, when you're using just a single biobed, will be removed. But if you do it in sequence, you have two biobeds, they can actually remove more than 98%. At the same time, they found that there's some limitations, like about 3 herbicides were found to be more difficult to remove, chlorpyralid and imidacloprid. And these were removed up to 60% when they used the 2-stage biobed system. The one thing also to keep in mind that avoid applying concentrated pesticide direct to the biobed, as this can affect the microbial communities. Of course, it makes sense that fungicides will affect the fungi in the biobed, but if you actually use 2 in a sequence, the community, the fungal community will recover. And like I said, AFC has done thorough research on this, and there's actually information on how to construct the biobed, and that's one thing that we want to install at some of our research stations in IITA, starting with Ibadan. So thank you, and stay safe. Thank you. I apologize for the quality of the audio there.
It went well, Alick. Thanks a lot. So thanks, Alick, for good presentation. We definitely need not only talk about the culture that is important, but how to do that. That people needs to know tools and yeah. Thanks. I'm pretty sure that it was useful for all of us. We can now go to some questions. The first question here we have from Gary was: is there any database of workplace injuries in the CG? Do any center track and report these? Alick, do you want to comment on that? This is IITA may. Yeah.
Okay, is there any database for workplace injuries? Not that I'm aware of, but we're starting to build that database. So through some regular meetings, we would like to keep track of injuries, if at all, every month. But I don't know of any database that exists right now. There may be something at corporate level that I'm not privy to. Just being new in the system, I think I would have to dig deeper, but I'm not aware of any system that exists, at least in IITA.
Yeah, so yeah, thanks, Alick. We have in some centers, we have the risk management units that track that. But of course, there are many things to improve, especially in terms of being more or preventive than reactive. And yeah, anyway, so thanks for that, Alick. So the other question we have here, it's from Amir. I think that is for you, Paige. While in the process of establishing the safety culture within Corteva, did you face resistance? Safety is, I can't read that. Safety is disregarded mostly at the operator levels. What measures did you take to make sure all employees comply?
Yeah, that's a great question. I know there's kind of a similar around how do you ensure employees do this? How do you reinforce this? What do you do when employees do not? And I'd say as with any major change, at the beginning you engage the team, and you also get their feedback before kind of that final rollout. There is a compliance that we have, a legal compliance that requirement that we must do. The culture expands beyond that, but I would say from how seriously we take this is from a positive aspect. When we put together our yearly goals, we include safety within that goals, and not just as a statement of we will be safe. We really try to think of at least one specific way that we would improve the safety environment, whether that's educational, whether that's a specific task, whether that's expanding a program within our yearly goals. So that's one, we incorporate in our yearly goals. And so then when we have our calibration at the end of the year and kind of our rating for our performance for the year, safety is a part of that. And so that's one way that we help bring that change through. And again, we have leaders that are demonstrating those safe behaviors, positively reinforcing those that are doing a really great job in this area, and then helping those that need some additional encouragement. But on the other side, I will say, if we have someone who completely disregards our safety practices, we have let people go for that. And there's, this driving example recently within a different group of the organization, but one that got highlighted just as a reminder. Names were removed, but the act is, we have a policy, a driving safety policy, that we are not to be on the phone, even if it's hands-free, while driving. And so we had an employee that was in a meeting, actually had their video on so you could see them driving. The people in the meeting told them to pull, please shut off, pull to the side of the road, or get to a safe parking place. And if they need to call back or don't, or just not attend this meeting, you're driving. and they disregarded that advice, and that employee was let go. And so for anyone who intentionally disregards safety, it could lead up to them being released from the company. It's not always that severe, but that's how significant we take safety.
Thanks, Paige. This is definitely good advice, because I mean, of course, we need to promote, not only or promote, but we need to act accordingly. And this is, we have many people in this call that good for them to listen to that and really act accordingly, and really use this type of things as an example too. Thanks. Another question that I think that also could I suppose that is directed to you too, Paige. Do you use a software package to handle the documents and the compliance processes? If so, what software do you use?
Yeah, good question. And we've I believe all we do use software to help us with the documents. There's a few different, and I believe they're internally developed, but one is called Equipped, and it's more of a read and acknowledge. And so as you read a standard, you just acknowledge that you've read it, and then that allows us to track who's read that. We also have training, so we have a training system, an online training tool that we have, and again, then that records anyone who's gone through that training. And then we have a third database that's we call it our Corteva management system, and so that also holds all of the standards, all of the changes, and that's more of the, I would say, the library of where we hold our standards that you can go, you can read, you can click on and hyperlink into different spaces. So we have a training tool that also holds employee development, all types of training, but our safety training is incorporated in that. We have the library of our standards electronically. And then we have a separate tool that says we've read a certain standard and that we've acknowledged that we've read it. So then that way, that's part of our compliance tool. So those are the three that we currently use.
Thanks. This question was from Teresa Heitman, and she's also asking, I think that you partially answered that question. I don't know if you think that maybe it's better to elaborate more. How does Corteva measure success in safety?
That's a good, yeah. So from those three programs that I mentioned, one, we look at successful completion. So we are always trying to increase our number of successful completion. We also have another database where we're tracking the incidences. And so we also, if there's a injury or illness, we're tracking that. Also, if we do a site audit and something's not in compliance, we have a date by which we want to ensure that that's corrected, and then that successful completion by that target date. And so we track all those metrics, and then we summarize them monthly and communicate that to our global team. And so for us, success is just improvement in those metrics, and then we celebrate at the site level when we have, for example, like so many days injury free, hopefully so many months or so many years. We've had some great year accomplishments, but we also do recognition events at sites that really hold to a strong safety culture.
Thanks, Paige. One question here, I think this question can both of you, either Paige and you, Alick, I think that you can help. This was asked by let me just show this, Ogumbe. In case there's some staff members who refuse to comply with safety procedures, how can a supervisor handle such issue? Gary comment on that shouldn't non-compliance in safety be treated in the same ways as any other form of non-compliance or non-performance of duties? So you mentioned partially of the maybe extreme, but maybe some level, or how the supervisor can manage that. Both of you, Paige, Alick, do you want to comment? Go ahead. Paige first.
Oh, you want me? Okay, yep, I can go first. Well, and even in the day-to-day, so I think as we see team members, as we see employees, as we see contractors doing something that doesn't fit our safety culture, or we can provide them that feedback, I'd say, directly. And then as we have one, depending on the circumstances, I know there's kind of a range of how we engage with our team members, but if we have one-on-ones, I think that's also a really powerful time to provide them that direct feedback and sharing. I'm not seeing you really embracing safety as we need to at this site. And it's like, I care about you and I care about those actions, how it can affect you personally, but also I would put it in the context of how it affects the whole group. Because a lot of times what someone thinks is an individual safety behavior actually impacts the whole site. And individuals don't always see that. And I would help them understand that broader context to their actions, but I would address it directly. And then if over time that they still don't follow the safety procedures, practices, or protocols, and it's more of an intentional withdrawal from that, then personally, I feel that that's a performance problem. So then we have a performance issue, and then I'd go through what steps we need to take from a performance. So that could be a warning letter. So it doesn't always go straight to you did not follow, now someone is fired. That is an extreme example, but when you have consistent behavior that is putting themselves or others at risk, a warning letter might be very appropriate to just help them see the severity of those actions. But I would provide that feedback to them first so that they have a chance to make a different choice.
Yeah. Alick, thanks, Paige. I agree. Alick, you want to comment? You are on mute. I don't know if you want to comment. Okay. Go ahead, Alick.
Oh, can you hear me? Oh boy. Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah. From my experience, I think this shouldn't be taken as. Sorry, I'm getting feedback here. It shouldn't be punitive in nature when you're dealing with an employee that's not following safety measures or standards. But it's an opportunity to be a teaching moment to reinforce why safety is important, and probably provide them a chance to be retrained. I was talking about JSAs, maybe refer them to the JSAs so that they can go through them SOPs. But if they are repeating the behavior, there might be an opportunity to reassign them to something else, or maybe start a rehabilitation process. I know it's easy to say you should just lay them off, but if you can try to help them and use that as a teaching moment for them and for the other employees.
Thanks, Alick. Agreed. So I think that is as strong as the culture in the organization, the easiest is the environment to provide feedback. Because, sorry, Alick, I will make you because sometimes we also need to provide feedback to our supervisor in this case because this situation can also happen. And as strong as I said, as strong as the culture, the environment is easier to provide this feedback. I see Elizabeth with the raised hand. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Yeah, thank you, Gustavo. So I just wanted to make an addition here. In IITA, at the end of the year, when we do the PAR, we score for adherence to safety and risk consciousness, and it's scored for all the staff. Again, in IIT, again, the drivers from FMS, if you go through the year without any motor accident, you are kind of motivated. They give them extra support, something to motivate them. So that kind of enhances people who do good job. So when we have training at our unit, cassava breeding, for example, if there is a good practice being done by someone, we kind of reinforce it. We show others to learn from it. So it could be two-way. So you could give some corrective measures. And then if you find that the person is not adhering, you move the person from where he is and give somebody the chance. So I think these are things we do here and can be reinforced. But there's a need for continuous improvement and supervision, so that you ensure that people adhere. Thank you so much, sir.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Yeah, we need to strengthen these things and do even more. We have another question here, Paige. I think this question is also to you. Do you have a model of the safety and health system that you could share? This model might include all the components and their frequency of use the results in a sustainable safety and health culture. This question was made by Teresa.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. About a model of safety and health that you could share. Probably. I'm trying to think of. It's a bit complicated. I try to share it through those pillars. I know that's pretty high level. The frequency of use in a sustainable safety and health culture. But I think when you kind of take a few steps back on what that safety, the compliance piece is the framework to what we need from a safety, even from a safety culture. People need to know how to be safe, and so you've got your standards that form kind of the bones. And then you have that education that you're providing to team, and it comes back and forth. It is that dialogue. There's times where we may make mistakes because we don't know, or we don't know very well. The examples I was giving was more that intentional, just disregard for safety practices. For those that are still actively learning, it's a very different tone. As people learn, you need to provide them that support. So then there's that strong educational component and dialogue that occurs. I think it's also with every other change that happens, the structure has to be present. The training or education component also needs to be strong. And then you need to have that leadership support and that visible engagement from leadership within that safety program. And then that reinforcement. And my hope would be that overwhelmingly it's that positive reinforcement. In those very few exception cases, it's a negative, but overall it should be that positive. And so I'd say that's how I would lay out that the structure from the standards, the training and education, the visible leadership support, and then the reinforcement, positive, and then if absolutely necessary, the negative.
Thanks, Paige. I think that we still have time for two questions. One question, Alick, what's the frequency? This question was made by Amir. What's the frequency you update the JSA? What should be, or maybe ideally, or any comment on that, Alick?
Yeah, thanks, Gustavo. Ideally, this should be done at least on a yearly basis. Like I said, there are some tasks like planting that is done on maybe a few weeks a year. So there is a lapse. So at least you should be reviewing the JSAs. But this was also dictated by changes in situations like, say, when you had COVID, right? You have to incorporate that into the JSAs, because now you are introducing a new hazard in terms of touch points and things like that. and so that's going to dictate that when you're going to append new steps that you should be taking to minimize, say, the spread of COVID. Of course, when you're getting new equipment or you're making adjustments to the equipment or modifications to the equipment, you should be adjusting the JSAs to reflect that change. Yeah, so at least on a yearly basis, you should be looking at your JSAs. It might not require that you go through everything, but just pick some of them that may be outdated.
Thanks, Alick. One final question here. We have some questions related to the materials, and we will be sharing these. The recordings will be available materials, so we will communicate that later on how. Question here, Paige, to you, and I think that this additional comment on that, this question came from Peter Koloko. In Corteva, do you have safety budget, and that is tracked separately from the research or from the breeding operations? And the comment that he also added is that in CG, he works in CG, that we would probably need dedicated budgets for safety training, safety equipment, etc. So, your comment on that, Paige?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And in the past, we've sometimes had a separate safety budget. Currently, we have it built into our operational budgets, but the point is, with environmental health and safety, they're the group that typically manages the training budgets. And then all personal protective equipment that we require, we cover. We also have a safety safe clothing allowance so it's like if you need specific work boots for out in the field, or if your job requires steel-toed boots, for example, we would cover that. Prescription safety glasses as needed, hats and UV shirts, or we provide depending on what the situation is. But we usually have allowances for that. And then we also, again, from positive reinforcement, we have it's called safety vouchers. And so it depends on the country what the absolute value is, but there's a few US dollar equivalents per month. So anytime we have at a certain site that employees have had no safety incidences, then or preventable safety incidences, then that money is combined at the site, and then they can have a party or do something and reinvest it into the team. So we do that as a positive reinforcement too. And currently that's within our operational budgets, but we've increased operational budgets to allow for these safety components.
So yeah, thanks, Paige. Definitely super important to find one way to fund this. It's needed. So we don't have more time for questions, but at least I would open for you, Paige, and after for Alick for final comments.
Just again, thank you so much for the invitation. I really appreciate this time with you all. And Alick, Gustavo, thank you so much for this time. And safety is something that we only can get better together. It's not an individual effort. It's all of us together to really improve the safety of those around us. So I just put that challenge out for us all today. And again, thank you for the opportunity to join.
Thanks, Paige. Thanks. We thank you too. It was a pleasure. Alick, any final comment from you?
Yeah, no. Thanks, Gustavo, for this opportunity, and Paige for sharing your experience. I think it's invaluable for us. As IITA, we are on the journey trying to make safety part of our culture. So, and we are always willing to learn. And so thank you so much for making yourself available, and for everybody else for participating. Thanks.
So thank you. Thanks, everyone. So really good discussion, super important topic. Don't forget. So we need to always be aware of these things, and so take care of each other. These, as I said, materials will be available to you And thanks again. Thanks, Paige. Thanks, Alick. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.